Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Going to look at our very basic Bible study again today. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 39 and see what's happening to Joseph. Remember, he was sold and taken to Egypt, and let's see what happens to him down there. Genesis chapter 39 verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So, some time has passed now. Joseph has been taken down to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, and he's doing quite well. He's trusting the Lord, and the Lord is blessing him. Verse 3. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. Wow, that's pretty impressive. And when it says that his master saw that the Lord was with him, that might be a significant statement in that surely as Joseph prospered and the Egyptian prospered, he could see that there was something special about him. But for the Egyptian to give credit to God indicates, to me at least, that Joseph was not bashful about crediting God with what was going on. And so as he prospered, he told people, God is doing this. That's just my opinion, but I think it's a valid inference from what we read here. And how is it that Joseph is with the Lord and prospering? But we saw in previous chapters his brothers, how they sinned against God and were violent men, and even wanted to kill Joseph and sell him. And so I'll digress here for just a minute, and let's go back to Genesis 18. In Genesis 18, the pre-incarnate Christ and a couple of angels had appeared before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and met with Abraham and basically told him what was going to happen. But during that meeting, there's a couple of very important statements made. So let's look at chapter 18, verse 17. I'll start with 17. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Verse 18, since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. In other words, since I have made this covenant with Abraham, should I tell him what I'm going to do in Sodom and Gomorrah? But the key here, though, is that he references this covenant, that he's going to make him a blessing to all nations. And look at verse 19. It says, for I have chosen him in order that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, in order that the Lord might bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. So Abraham is supposed to teach his children, teach his household, and require that they obey the Lord and follow the Lord. And one way you do this is through example, of course, but another way is through actual teaching. But we can see in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that they weren't always the best examples, but they must have been teaching their children something. Now, the children can reject it, just as we saw Joseph's brothers were murderers and liars, and they wanted to kill Joseph. Surely they must have been taught something by Jacob, later called Israel. And Joseph heard this teaching too, but it seems like it took with Joseph, because he's trusting the Lord, he's giving the Lord credit, he's obeying the Lord, he's living, even though he's a sinful man, he's living a righteous life. I mean, he's really prospering. Just as this verse we just read said, in order that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. You live for the Lord, live for God, then there'll be a blessing to all the nations in one respect. Now, we've already pointed out that the real basis for this is the life, death, and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, who saved the world through his death, through his substitutionary death on the cross. And so that's the real blessing to all mankind. But there's physical blessing as well. And here we see Joseph prospering. And one of the reasons he's prospering is, even though Jacob probably wasn't the greatest example all the time, he must have been teaching him, just like his other brothers, about the Lord and encouraging him to follow and trust in the Lord. So let's go back now to our chapter and see what else happens with Joseph. Verse 5. And it came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned, in the house and in the field. So just as we said, because the Lord was with Joseph, all those around him were being blessed. Verse 6. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there, he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. And there is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" Here we see Joseph's real heart. And he's saying, this wouldn't just be a sin against my master. This would be a sin against God. This would ruin my God's reputation. This is against his will. And so Joseph refused. Must have been a bad situation for him to live in this kind of environment. Verse 10, and it came about as he spoke to Joseph day after day that he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there inside. And she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. One of the greatest ways to avoid sin is flee from it. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to be tempted. But he did. He fled. He left the scene to get away from that temptation. Verse 13, when she saw that he had left his garment with her in her hand, and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I screamed. And it came about when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, that he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside." So a pure 100% lie. She was the instigator of the incident. Verse 16. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she tells him the story. Verse 17. Then she spoke to him with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make sport of me. And it happened as I raised my voice and screamed that he left his garment beside me and fled outside. Now it came about when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, 'This is what your slave did to me,' that his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail." So what else could the master do? I mean, it's he said, she said, and of course he's going to believe his wife, at least outwardly, and puts him in jail. Verse 21. Let me back up a second. Now after these events, he's been sold by his brothers, taken to Egypt, sold as a slave. He's been serving his master faithfully. His master has been prospering. Now due to this lie, he's thrown into jail. One would kind of expect that he would be a little bit bitter and upset and angry about this. But let's see what happens. Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. So he hasn't turned his back on God. What he's going through is not pleasant. I mean, he's in jail. His freedom has been taken from him, but he still has fellowship with the Lord, still trusting in God, and the Lord is still with him because of that, I'm sure. Verse 22. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. In other words, Joseph was responsible for it. Verse 23. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. So Joseph is still following the Lord. Because of that, he's being blessed, made happy, even though of his bad situation and circumstances. And those around him, the jailer is prospering. I often wonder what happened to Potiphar once Joseph left, but we don't have that story. But we're going to see that Joseph has listened to whatever training he got from his father. He is obeying the Lord. He's trusting God, even in these bad circumstances. And this has been going on for years now. But he's still trusting God. What a tremendous example to us to remember in unpleasant situations we find ourselves in. Anyway, we're going to see in these subsequent chapters the dreams that Joseph had that he shared with his brother that made them hate him more, remember, actually come to fruition. And it's a very miraculous and wonderful story. But during all of this, we're going to see a verse later where Joseph tells his brothers, this is way down the road, regarding their attempt to kill and sell him. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. because he is trusting the Lord, he is seeing and benefiting and reaping God's best. God meant it for good, even though you meant it for evil. And we're going to see him keep this attitude until he's reunited with his brothers later. So we'll see what goes on, continues next time. But I hope this has been meaningful and encouraging to you, and I hope you'll check out the next video as well. In the meantime, God bless, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.